But one of my worries is, you know, the lost ability of transferring information from generation to generation, right? Like that's something that I worry about. And it's not, when I say worry, it's just like something I'm aware of going to the future. I'm just like, that's going to be
Not
interesting
keeping
to
you up
see.
at night.
No, but it's just interesting just to think, you know what I mean? Like when I was growing up, very fortunate that my folks were like, you're never having an Xbox, you're never having computer games. You fuck, you live in the outback, you've got a horse, a motorbike.
And a gun.
And you just drive around, shoot shit. No, seriously. Mate, it was awesome. I had a semi-automatic gun when I was like 7 or 8, driving around doing water runs with a dog, mate. It was the legit, right? But what I really cherish from those moments is that, you know, we're on a little station. Dad always had a few staff. Every night we'd have dinner, and it was like, you know, the jackaroos or contractors who ever worked with Dad, Mum and Dad, my sister and I. We'd sit there, and we had to sit up there and have dinner with everyone and communicate and listen and like hear stories from the day. And like that was awesome, you know what I mean? And when Nan and Pop would come, same thing. Like they'd be telling stories, and you'd have to sit there and listen. You don't see that now. You like go to a restaurant, and it sort of pains me in a way because I'm like, that poor kid is sitting there on an iPad because it's easier for mum and dad to like give it to him than for him to have the shits and sit there and listen and learn something.
But he's supposed to, for development, have the shits. So, I mean, we're going through this in the moment. It's like, at what point do you just take the easy route? But I know you guys talk about this a lot, but I think this goes back to the whole campfire thing, right? Like we learn we process all information by telling stories.
Oh man, yeah. I love this. I love this.
This is how we transfer information. That has been true. Fuck, I remember when me and Laura went to Darwin, went up to the NT, and we went and did Kakadu National Park and stuff, and you go and see the Aboriginal. Well, anyway, this Aboriginal elder was talking us through the process, and he was like, "There's levels." I think it's called Ubir. Yeah, it's called Ubir, the rock formations. And there were levels to it when you get to the top. And each level had different story on there that was a level of education. So what happened was when you get to the first level at a certain age, you're ready to hear this story. And it was literally, and this is where you see the fish. And you get to some point, this way you see the fish, and they've got all the parts of the fish in there. And it's showing you how to get the best out of a fish, to eat a fish, and how to hunt. And there was one there, like the first lesson they got was around crocs, right? Because crocs were a problem for little kids, don't go near waterways and stuff. And they had all these stories that they would tell in front of the paintings to show these kids so they'd learn. And that hasn't changed. That honestly, that hasn't changed. The problem is you've got to think who's telling the stories now. And unfortunately, I think with kids, and this is the thing with TikTok, right? TikTok's a thing now. Brands who are trying to sell things are telling the stories, not the people who. It's not genuine. And I'm not saying. I am aware that you guys, like, obviously sell clothes and stuff, but you have a genuine message that you're trying to help people with. Nike aren't. Nike are influencing you. And these companies, and the kids are digesting their stories from their tablet, right? And it's not the parents doing it.
No,
right?
but I think, you know, one thing I've always not been envious of, but I've been like, that's really cool, is like, you know, like Lebo families and stuff, like Greeks, right? Like they stick together. You know what I mean? They have family businesses, and like, they blew and stuff, but they work it out, and there's a hierarchy. You know what I mean? Like grandparents are in charge, parents, kids, you know, grandkids. Like that's just how it. There's a hierarchy and a learning, and everyone eats together, and they all work it out. Whereas the Caucasian, we just have kids, breed them to a certain point, try and piss them off as early as possible. Then the folks go off, live somewhere else. They try and retire, whatever like that. We sort of just kick them out the door straight away. Yeah. Whereas they're not like building that really strong, healthy lifetime community.
It was like the story that Glenn Azar was telling us about the families and communities in PNG. Yeah. How they still just live together every generation, and then when kids get to a certain age, when they become adults, and then they start to shack up with the women or whatever and form their own families, the rest of the village builds them a hut, like builds them a house. It's like, oh well, these guys need a house now. We'll all
that's community.
This is what we do, but that's what's missing.
A major link.
Well, I think that answers your question about the kind of the boomer generation. I feel like really sorry for that generation because
they've got all the houses.
7 each.
They've got money, right? Yeah, they've got all the stuff because that's what matters.
Have you ever thought about that, driving around suburbs and think, who the fuck owns all these houses?
Yeah, true.
Anyway, continue.
But
they're
I feel like they're a generation unfortunately sandwiched where the generation before had extended family living together and the vulnerability happened within the family unit. I think that was more of a thing, and I know that's true of other cultures. Everybody looks after everybody else, and the nagging stereotype is the nagging Jewish mother. Have you heard that, right? Like constantly asking, "Are you warm enough? Are you okay? Do you want more food?" And all like. But
sounds like my mum.
Right. But that used to be
always caring about whatever other people are doing.
And that used to be like a little group, and everyone lived together, and that would happen. And my father's generation was the first generation where you had isolated mum, dad, kid families, and you see the grandparents twice a week. And then also, it's a problem now where we don't look after the grandparents when they need help.
Yeah.
We put them in a home, and then we put the kids in a fucking nursery so we can keep working. And it's like
it's so bad. It is so bad.
When you look at it, you think, "What are we doing?"
But that's marketing again.
Well, there's lots of money in it.
That's it. It's like, I need to go and work because if I don't work, I can't bring the income in. And if I don't bring the income in, I can't put the kid into childcare. And then, you know what I mean? It's just like far out.
The tail is wagging the dog.
Yeah. Like, where do you go? What do you do? It's a tough one.
The stories you talk about, like the stories with Indigenous culture, I think we can learn so much from.
100%.
Like, I think it really pisses me off to a degree, that there's all these debates and, all these different conversations that we have in this country, right? And I don't remember learning a single story about, Aboriginal culture at school. And I don't know why. Like, that's
because,
something
you're going down a very political path.
But this is, it's not like, so I guess my point is like, that's a culture who have just done the best job of passing down stories from generation to generation.
Not writing it down. And we're talking stories from like fucking thousands of years, right? It's insane.
But I think it's we could learn a lot from, the style of communication. And even when it comes to mental health, and like you said before, you were stuck in a place where you didn't want to tell anyone about your breakdown, but really the right thing to do is fucking tell everyone. That's the right thing to do.
Hi, my name's Ben, and I have mental health issues. Like strangers, anyone.
But that's the first step. We're always talking about closing the gap, reconciliation. Nothing's going to change until we're educated. Nothing.
That's why when we did
nothing,
we did a recent talk for
Ozwater,
and it was at the convention centre, and there was no audience.
It was a live stream,
1,500 room, live stream.
Very interesting.
And there was a fellow there, Derek Oram Sandy, who did the Welcome to Country, and
it was on LinkedIn yet?
No, and it was the best Welcome to Country I have ever heard, and it was this fella just spinning yarn.
Talking about Bulimba. It was awesome.
Talking about Bulimba, but he was talking about northern suburbs of Brisbane to the west, out to Ipswich, Toowoomba and south, and he was talking about
the river all connected.
All the waterways connected and where it all, and what it means to Aboriginal culture and how it all comes together around Bulimba, which is the heart of Brisbane, and it's actually shaped like a heart from above. And it's like, for him to tell that story about their connection to water, and one of the big things that really stuck with me was they understand how the water flows and they understand how it all comes together and where it all ends up around this heart of Bulimba. They understand it. They never try to control it. They understand it and they work with it.
Right.
And I just thought, man, there's so much metaphor in that with so many issues and things that go on in our lives and things that we try to control. We don't understand ourselves.
Control.
We don't understand ourselves, let alone, sort of anyone else. So how can you, if you can't understand yourself, how can you sort of work with yourself,
100%. 100%. And it's always been something that's mystified me. I can't really talk because in the UK, we learn about World War II and we learn about the Romans. we don't learn about colonialism like whatsoever, right?
wanna
You just
tell you,
fucking you just brush that off. But if you look at what's really obvious is if you look at New Zealand, I'm not saying racism doesn't exist because it fucking definitely does. It exists everywhere, but they make a conscious effort, even at the government level, to celebrate the Maori culture. Like it's woven into, even the language is woven in as much as physically possible. And here it's like, I mean,
it's just not a part of day to day.
Non-existent.
You think about it. Could you imagine the outcry? Could you imagine the outcry if the Wallabies had it was just announced, right? Just announced Wallabies have got to go out and they'll perform an Aboriginal dance before, the next test match. There would be a fucking outcry. The one thing in the world, you don't even have to know what rugby is. Yeah. Everyone that's got a TV or has read a newspaper knows what the haka is and knows how sacred it is. That's what's wrong, in this country from a cultural standpoint. We have fucked that up so bad.
But coming from being Caucasian, males who I wouldn't have a fucking clue where I come from. I don't have a culture to celebrate. I'm just,
Isle of Man, I think I'm from.
Yeah, but it's
the Rosses.
But I want that, you know what I mean? I want those stories. That story from Derek made me want more of that, why don't, because it's fucking cool. And it's this big thought I have is one of my favorite things to do ever is to stand around a fire. Outside.
Yeah, it's the best. Yeah.
Standing around a fire, spinning yarns, telling stories. Yeah. What is it? Is it this country? Is it something in Australia that we just like that? It's well, hang on. Fuck, there's a culture that's been doing that here for fucking thousands of years, dancing around fires and telling stories. And it's you wonder why as Australians we like that? It's because it's in our fucking soil.
When I was working in South Australia for about 6 weeks, we went down there. My cousin got a lease down there on this property and we had to go down and do this big muster. Anyway, myself and a couple of the Indigenous fellas from the community where we used to work, we went down there and it was freezing, middle of winter, Central Australia. It was negative 6 degrees some mornings. It was fucking grossly cold. And I'll never forget, we were waiting for the helicopter to arrive from Alice Springs. So we're we'll sit around here and start a fire. Me and these other couple of jackaroos were there. We've just got this fire and we've lit it up and away it goes. I've looked across and Dion was this old black fella and he was a legend. And he's standing behind us and he's made this little fire and he's sitting around it. And I remember he just looked over at us. He goes, "You white fellas are mad. You make big fire because you're cold and then run away from it. Us black fella make little fire and sit around and get warm." Mate, I'll never forget that. Brilliant. It was just and it was so true. It was you dickheads have gone over there, built this thing. You do not need it like that. You just need this little fire and you can sit around and do exactly what you wanted from it. It was I learned a lot that day. It was
There's
great.
Something I think I want to tap into somehow, and it's that power of storytelling, and it can be inspired by a culture that's inhabited this land for a lot longer than we have. And I think if we did more of that and got better at doing that, there's so many social kind of issues.
But it connects everyone there.
It is, but that's all it is. It's a sense of community and belonging and spinning yarns together. So we don't do that enough, and it goes back to the social media shit we were talking about.
Well, we do because everything's relayed by story, but we're outsourcing it to people who are trying to make money from it, and it's true everywhere in the world. Honestly, it's true everywhere. I just think it's a human thing. It really is. If you go to the pub with your mates, how does the conversation go? And it's always mate, I've had a shit day. This happened, this happened, this happened. Well, have you heard? And you can even go all the way to what is religion? Religion is just, there's a fucking big book full of stories that you're supposed to learn lessons from. We could debate religion all you want, but if you're learning anything, it's through you. Obviously, you can do the facts and the figures and the stuff, but I'm bad with the stats. But there is a stat somewhere about memory retention of if you tell a story that adds context to a statistic. Massive amount.
Yeah, but that's